image of Africa we have in the developed world has been coloured by pictures of misery, war, famine, disease. But as countries across the continent grow increasingly prosperous through high prices for commodities and natural resources, there are also signs that governments are trying to tackle the man-made problems of corruption and bad government. Malawi has a fairly new president, Joyce Banda, one of only 2 women heads of state ever from Africa. She came into office and scrapped the presidential jet, selling off some of the perks of power. Malawi is one of the poorest countries in the world, with around 3/4 of the population living on less than $1 a day. Until last year, relations with many Western countries had soured, aid schemes had been frozen, and corruption was at the heart of economic life.
I, Joyce Hilda Ntila Banda.
Enter President Joyce Banda. As well as the presidential jet, the fleet of 60 Mercedes cars bought by the previous president have been ditched. Mrs. Banda says she's used to hitchhiking. She brought in tough economic reforms and the currency has been devalued by 1/3 to try to kickstart the economy, although this has caused big protests. One thing she hasn't scrapped is the country's strong relationship with China. As in other parts of Africa, Beijing is now a key player in Malawi, and it's not difficult to see examples of Chinese investment all around. However, Malawi still has important ties with Britain. A couple of days ago, President Banda was at the David Livingstone Centre just outside Glasgow to mark the bicentenary of the Scottish missionary's birth. And she's trying to drum up support to help rebuild her country's fragile economy. Earlier today in London, I was able to have a few words with her. Madam President, do you think those of us in the West sometimes misunderstand Africa? We see the bad news. We hear about the wars, we see famines. We don't see the economic development and the local entrepreneurs like yourself, actually.
I think what I would like to say is that the world needs to appreciate that Africa is not all the bad news they see on the Western media. Africa has a lot of opportunity. In Africa, you find good leadership all the way down to grassroots level. Yes, in a country like Malawi, there's abject poverty. People living on 50% of the people living on $1 a day. That is why the West needs to come in and partner with us. We don't want the West to come and tell us what to do.
Is China a good partner for you as well because of the way in which they do business in Africa, which is different perhaps from the way the Europeans do business?
The West and China are partners that have come into Africa. They've taken different approaches, but at the end of the day, those that benefit are Africans. So I would not want to criticize China or to criticize the West. China has come, for example, in Malawi, they've given us both grants and loans, just like the World Bank has done, just like the IMF has done.
I've heard people in other developing countries say, we like dealing with the Chinese because it's a business relationship. They're not the old colonial powers. And also, they don't lecture in the way that the Europeans sometimes do about human rights and other things. And that is a very different relationship. Is that true?
I, personally, as Malawi, shall take aid from the West with its conditions and meet those conditions because the money belongs to the West. But I shall also deal with the Chinese. I hope that we never get to a point where it's a condition from any part of the world to say we will only give you aid if you don't deal with the Chinese. That must never happen.
But I was wondering if Britain, for example, and other European countries could learn from the Chinese and the way in which they deal with you in Africa, if you think that would be a positive thing, that Britain could learn from some of this.
They deal with you as a partner. They don't impose most of the strict rules that maybe a Western country would do. The Chinese are more lenient. The Chinese respect African countries. That's how we feel.
Can I ask you about your leadership? Because you're remarkable, because you're a woman leader in Africa, and there's only been one other woman president in Africa. Do you think you're judged by a different standard? Do you think it's been particularly difficult because you're a woman? It's been a rough old year for you, hasn't it, the past year?
Yeah, it has been rough, but it has been rough because I've been cleaning up the mess that I found. I think it would have been different if I had found a thriving economy and everything was fine. But I got into office when the economy had collapsed, literally. And so we had to get back on track. To get back on track, we needed to make some very bold decisions. Bold decisions that resulted in some negative impact on the poor. And therefore, we had also to come up with the social programs that cushioned that shock. So that cannot be easy, whether you are a man or a woman. And stay the course I will, even if it costs me the next elections. Because I must do what I think is best for the people of Malawi, including selling the presidential jet. Sometimes I go to conferences with fellow African leaders, and I'm the only one traveling by commercial flight. And as well as reducing my salary by 30%. It meant very little, but at the end of the day, all I wanted to demonstrate to my fellow Malawians is that I'm prepared to suffer with them.
I was going to quote to you what one woman said, not a fan, you know her very well, Calista Mutarika, who said, "You're just a market woman selling fritters." That's not a very sisterly thing to say.
But that's okay. That's okay. She's fine. I mean, she's right. Because I've spent my life, 30 years of my life, empowering rural women, including herself.
So you see this as a compliment?
Yeah. In fact,
to be a market woman.
In fact, Malawian women, because 3/4 of Malawians, 85% to be exact, are rural people. And the 3/4 of the women that I've worked with are market women. So if I am aligned with the majority of women who have to struggle every day, sit in the market, come sun, come rainfall, that's fine. That's my mission.
Madam President, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Activists in Malawi say they are wearing black because they are in mourning. Millions of US dollars are missing from the country's budget, money given to the government by international aid donors, some of whom have, for now, stopped giving money to the country.
The 40% that the donors have suspended in supporting the budget of Malawi, that's a big percentage as well. And knowing that even part of the money has been routed, so that one will cause more suffering upon Malawians. Very shortly, we might see that the fuels will not be there in filling stations. The forex to buy most of the commodities will not be there.
The local currency, the kwacha, continues to lose its value. Interest rates are going up, and so is inflation. So it's become more practical to exchange the kwacha on the black market to stronger currencies like the South African rand or the US dollar. Malawi is already one of the poorest countries in the world. Carpenter Banyapiri is angry about the corruption scandal.
Since of that, we're failing to see everything change. We're still on poor, and we're going down. We're going deeply down.
Activists say they are planning peaceful protests. These are being given out to people. They're being asked to wear black every Monday in protest against government corruption. Organizers say they're calling it Black Monday, and they're planning their first big march on the 9th of December. After the scandal broke, President Joyce Banda dissolved her cabinet. Some senior members of government have been fired and arrested. She's promised to do everything she can to end corruption. But those planning nationwide demonstrations next week say they want to know how millions of dollars disappeared under her watch. Haru Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Lilongwe. Harrison Folijala is shocked to hear that an estimated $4 million is missing from Malawi's budget, money given to the government by international donors. But he says he's never benefited from aid anyway.
We hear about donors assisting this country, but we don't know where that aid goes to. I don't get help. I have to fend for myself.
Eliza Duncan knows people who get seeds and fertilizer at subsidized prices because of donor funding, but she's not getting anything.
I feel bad when other people get help and I don't. Fertilizer is so expensive. I can't afford it.
Many like Eliza are also waiting for donor help, but for now some donors aren't giving the Malawi government money, accusing some politicians of stealing it. Many Malawans are angry at the scale of the corruption, but what seems to be an organized government syndicate.
When we are having people that are dying in the hospitals and people are just looting the money and putting it in their pockets, it really, I was very concerned, and I felt like our government is not being very responsible for my money.
Critics say senior politicians close to President Joyce Banda are being protected. Some individuals have been arrested. Malawians are being asked to be patient with the judiciary.
We can only say, please, let's understand the system and let's give it space to work properly. Because if we mess it up from the government side of it, there are the same people who will turn against us and say, you messed it up deliberately because you are trying to protect other people.
Donor money makes up about 40% of the state budget. Some people fear there could soon be shortages of basic commodities if money isn't pumped into government coffers soon. Harumatasa, Al Jazeera, Lilongwe.
The modest High Court in the capital is a setting for a corruption trial on an unprecedented scale. Charges are being brought separately against individuals, and within 2 weeks it's expected that as many as 10 simultaneous hearings will be underway. Appearing in the dock will be some of the country's most prominent politicians and business people.
The prosecution will in part argue that government computers were hacked into and sums of public money were simply transferred into private accounts. And the amounts are staggering. The country's current president estimates that as much as 30% of the country's budget has been stolen over the past decade.
It was President Joyce Banda who ordered the investigation that has led to these criminal proceedings, even though evidence indicates the widespread corruption that flourished under a previous administration did not end when she took office. She appointed a new justice minister to oversee the process, and the man Fahad Asani replaced was arrested this week on charges of laundering stolen money.
I was amazed because I never thought we could have people in our country doing that to their own country, because what I'm seeing, the whole thing is not just about theft, but it was economic sabotage.
The president, he says, has made it clear that even the most powerful must face justice.
In fact, she went further to say, even if it means a member of my family, that person should be arrested. And nobody, and she meant nobody, should be spared.
A long-suffering Malawian public was sceptical when Joyce Banda took office with the promise of clean governance. Cashgate is something by which she will stand or fall, as will what has been a tarnished nation. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Lilongwe. The opening session was marked by a heavy seasonal downpour, which kept umbrellas up and the number of public spectators in the court down. Some of those who did arrive sheltering from the camera as much as from the rain. The president's decision to press the charges has been generally welcomed, but there are some who still question her declared innocence in the whole affair.
Many people are also suspecting that the hands of Her Excellency Dr. Joyce Banda may not be that clean. She might have been directly involved in the Cashgate, because the issue, though it started way back, but it also happened, it has surfaced during the watchful eye of her administration.
Adjoining the High Court is the Labour Exchange, where the city's many unemployed come each day hoping to find work. And the dominant feeling here is that the Cashgate accused did not just steal public money, they also stole the people's jobs.
My view is that this case is necessary and it must continue to the end. We are the ones who are suffering. We are the ones who are looking for employment.
I am not happy with what has happened. I am very angry that I have no money because those people stole the money and built huge mansions.
Whether it's a president or a minister, we want the whole truth to be known.
The expectations of a shocked and angered Malawian people are clear, that all the guilty be punished and that the deep stain on governance of the past as well as of the present be washed away. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Lilongwe. For the first time, there's evidence of heightened security as the trial of 2 deputy police commissioners begins. The hearings now spilling out from the High Court into the magistrates' courts next door. Within the next week, it's expected that at least 10 separate trials will be underway. The proceedings are being closely watched by the international donors who've suspended millions of dollars of aid in the wake of the scandal. And each week they attend a meeting with government ministers to review proceedings.
I would like to commend my president for compromising on our sovereignty by allowing non-Malawian nationals to be part of it, because the lost money is not only Malawi money, it's also money that we had from the donors. And we would like to prove to them that we have nothing to hide and we have nobody to shield, so they have to be part of it.
But some allege these meetings fuel the assumption that all in the current government are innocent.
We are very worried how the progress is being done and how the donors are directly communicating to the executive when the executive too, their hands are not that clean.
A view rejected by donor representatives.
It's the government system which has turned out to be very fragile and which is being undermined. So of course we need to talk in the first place to this government to help and support and push also for rectifying the situation.
Back at the courts, details are emerging of specific charges. For example, 2 women named as owners of a construction company are accused of receiving government payments for work that was never done.
One of the accused has been given time to find a new lawyer. That's because the man who was supposed to represent her was arrested on Monday. He's Ralph Kasambara, a former justice minister, who ironically, or perhaps inevitably, is due himself to appear in this court on money laundering charges. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Lilongwe.
People queue to put food on the table. Each family only allowed to buy 10 kilograms of maize at a time. It's an amount that will not last for more than 2 days, so all will have to come back to stand in line again. Drought followed by floods is one reason for the shortage, but in the light of the Cashgate revelations, many believe that corruption contributed to it as much as climate, and that food is being stolen from their mouths.
The government should make sure they punish people in Cashgate, because innocent people are suffering. People in the villages don't have medicine, and they don't have fertilizer because of what happened.
Subsidies for fertilizer and seed account for half of the annual agricultural budget, and these are among the funds provided directly by international donors that have gone missing. The bulk of Malawi's maize is produced by small subsistence farmers like James Nyirongo, a local pastor, whose income relies on an excess crop that he can sell.
This year I didn't get any fertilizer at all. I have a huge garden and I didn't get any fertilizer at all.
All of this maize was planted at the same time when the rains came, unusually late in December. But that part of the crop was fertilized. This part of the crop was not. The farmer said he had a fraction of the fertilizer needed.
It is purely a man-made problem. It is not necessarily that we don't have the systems and structures, but it is personal greed that has crept into the system that resultantly has led the smallholder farmer not to access this fertilizer. So if we have to ask another question, if it's not the subsistence farmer, who is getting this fertilizer?
This is the nation's breadbasket, the green maize fields of Malawi's central province with Lilongwe at their core. And while climate has a major impact on the size of the harvest, the rampant corruption being revealed in the capital may also determine how much bread goes on the table. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Lilongwe. Corruption in the capital and maize shortages appear for the moment forgotten. The drums are warmed up and the praise singers in full voice as the people in this rural district celebrate the visit of the president. Joyce Banda is accompanied by her Liberian counterpart, who's here to inaugurate a joint electrical project. But the orange colour of the president's political party is everywhere, making clear this is as much a political rally as a state visit.
The suspension of foreign funding during the corruption investigation has hit the economy hard. Civil servants' salaries have not been paid, subsidies have been frozen, and President Banda's government may well suffer the consequences at the polls. It's a subtext officially ignored at the weekly meetings between donors and the government's Corruption Action Committee, yet all are aware of the political ramifications of a decision to resume aid payments or not.
It's not a political decision that we will take on the 11th of March. We will take a judgment based on factual progress. Yeah, and it is an art then, of course, to keep that out of the political debate, because anybody will, I mean, who has a stake in the election will use it for political purposes.
And President Banda insists she had a clear choice: to cover up and win elections or fight corruption.
I chose to fight corruption, and I intend to fight it with or without the support of donors. But as you can see, the rural people in Malawi have responded. They see exactly what I'm trying to do. So I just thank God for this opportunity to serve my people. And if I go, because of the fight against corruption, I shall go a very happy person, that at least I made the start, the first move. And I know now that any leader who comes now after me shall not stop, shall start from here and move forward.
The international donors are pondering their options. The corruption courts will make their rulings. But ultimately, the most important and lasting judgment will be that exercised by the people at the polls. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Salima, Malawi.